we're up and we're going. Okay, so hi everybody, I'm back again. I'm super, super, super sorry that I'm late, but this actually is probably going to be around the time I'm going to be starting again because I need to I need to start now rather than earlier. It works better for me to be starting later on in the evening. So I do apologize, but you will be able to watch the replays later on. So yeah, it's gonna be probably around this time. So it might be between 6:30 to 8:30. Because if I'm starting at 8:30, it's gonna be a very, very, very hard night for me. So, in an ideal world, it's gonna be like 6:30, but between 6:30 to 8:30, I will update the any of the schedules that I have posted because I know I posted schedules. See, this is what happened. I post a schedule and this happens. So this is why I don't like posting schedules because I am not good at schedules. Not with YouTube schedules and Twitch schedules. I like the idea of them, but like once a week, yes. I can do once a week. But every night is really, really challenging, especially with life. So I figure if I push it later, it'll probably work. Um, I'll try and figure out ways to be able to like notify you guys so that if I'm running later, I can let everyone know that I'll be starting later. I haven't figured that out yet because I'm just not that great at Twitch yet or YouTube. I'm sorry, guys. Yeah, I should know better. I need to learn these things. I will be learning these things. Anyway, that's enough rambling. Um, for those of you who are just tuning into this mess, my name is Beth, and I am Beth Wagner, and I am currently reading my dad's manuscripts. Um, I usually have a clipboard. I don't see today is just off kilter day. I don't have a clipboard, so that's fine. I will improvise as I always do. But for those of you just tuning in, I'm reading his manuscripts. They are mostly science fiction or fantasy and science fiction, mostly fantasy. There's a few science fiction. We'll get to those later. I will might be reading some later on this year. We'll see. If you're more of a fantasy fan, then just let me know because I might just not read those and I'll only read the fantasy, especially considering there's not a lot of crossover with the two genres. I mean, some people do. I mean, I've read science fiction and fantasy, but that doesn't mean that everybody does. And you know, I have way more fantasy stuff than I have science fiction stuff anyway. But let me know how you feel about that. Um, in the meantime, I'm currently on chapter 10, 10 of 32. So, also for those of you just tuning in, this is chapter 10 of 32, meaning that there are 9 other chapters before this one. So, you probably better off to start at the beginning and listen through until you get to tonight, which is chapter, yeah, because it's a story. I'm reading a chapter a night, so you can come in now, but you may not understand a lot. I mean, it's fairly simple to catch on, but I'm just saying for story's sake. But without ado further, sure, why not? um, I'll start reading. So, chapter 10 of the Saga of Haram. The flame being prowled around the circumference of the circle, occasionally flinging himself with a scream at the people. And did I mention that they left off with this big flaming being standing outside of a magic circle that's trying to keep them safe right now? Did I mention that? Well, there you go. That's the brief recap. Hiram and his friends are all trapped inside the circle. Fast forward. By Tran and Viron, whispered Asteran. The prowling entity turned his eyes on her. Ah, yes, Con, Con, Call on them by all means. One day shall be more powerful than they, and I shall rule supreme." He continued to prowl. Haram eased up beside Kuranes and whispered, "Could he actually break through this circle?" Oh, yes, he could indeed. But to do so would require that he put forth enough power to attract the attention of his more powerful enemies. His best hope is that one of us will break the circle. If that happens, he will deal with all of us in a blink of an eye. So make sure the horses are under control, and remember yourself that we are safer here than anywhere. It occurred to Harem to ask who their adversary was, but something told him that was not a good idea. Instead, he whispered to himself, "Tran and Viron be with us." The stalking foe turned to look at him. "You, boy, why should you be caught up in this? You have a life ahead of you. Go away. Leave these obstinate fools to their fate." He spoke so earnestly and persuasively that Harem could almost believe he would be let go. Even worse, he looked down and saw he had taken an involuntary step toward the circle. He remembered what Koranis had said about breaching the circle and forced him to stop. "Come, boy," said the sweet, reasonable voice again. "I will not harm you. Come out. Take your horse and go away." There was some sort of magic in that voice, and this time Heron was not aware of moving until he felt something holding him back. He looked down, and Karanis was holding his arm. He looked up into the druid's eyes, heard him murmur, "Hold firm, lad, hold firm." Exerting all his will, Heron held himself still, keeping his feet from moving. The adversary glared at him and the druid, and with a throwing motion of his hand, he cast a roaring gout of flame at them. The fire splashed harmlessly off the barrier around them, and the flaming being took to prowling once more. From time to time, he would stop and talk to one or other of the party, trying to persuade them to come out of the circle. The only one who he did not speak to, was Teriel, and Harem suspected that this was because she knew enough about him that she would not believe any of his promises. The only other one who moved, or nearly moved, was Asteran, and a touch on her shoulder by Oritst brought her back to her senses. Harem suddenly noticed that the sky was beginning to pale. The effect was to dull the brilliance of the flames and to make the adversary less fearsome. He finally approached the circle one last time and said with a snarl, "Be on your way then, but remember that there is nowhere you can hide from me. I will always remember you, and I shall find ways to be revenged." He disappeared in flames, and the flames gradually sank down into a sphere, into a tiny ball, into a tiny dot, and were gone. Karanis breathed deeply. "He is gone. Do not go out beyond the circle yet, until the dawn is fully up. But I think we are safe for the time being." Harem suddenly felt free enough to ask, "Who was that?" "Ah, he has many names. Mostly he is known by his Shondakaranian name of Drah, the Master of Lies." "And what would be the Harnasp Shandig? What would the Harnasp of Shabnazdig want with him?" "Power, just as anyone who wants to serve the Master of Lies. He can provide great power to his servants, but he is untrustworthy. Make a bargain with him, and you will usually find that he has twisted the wording of the bargain so that you come away the loser. That means that you become his slave, doing whatever he wishes and suffering whatever he lays upon you. But there will always be those who feel that they are shrewd enough to make a bargain that he cannot subvert. They always lose in the end, for often, if he cannot twist the bargain, he merely breaks it. But the Harnas might well feel it worth the risk to deal with him and gain whatever power he can gain, increasing his stature and prosperity. Dangerous business, but there you are." He turned to Teriel. When you come home, best to have your father visit a priest and buy the most powerful amulet he can purchase for you." He looked at her surprised face and chuckled. "I am a druid, but I still hear news. And such news of the disappearance of Teriel, daughter of Lavad, has come to even this part of the country." He looked at the four venturers. "Best should get amulets made as well. And also best you should not come too close to Shandakar for a while." "And what of you?" asked Haram. "Will you be safe here? Here in my grove? I'll be as safe as anywhere. And if I must, what? And if I have need to come out of my grove, I have the means to make myself safe." That's not what it says. It's just one of those words. Fix sentence. Please fix sentence. Yeah. "I'm sorry we brought such trouble on you," said Haram. "Aye, well, and so am I. But it's much too late to concern ourselves with such matters. At least he did no damage to the trees, though the area around this camp will not be the same for some years." They were riding in a southerly direction, roughly parallel to the Shandakarian border. They had stopped at Halan Hardus, Howardus for their pay, and Levad did not seek to cheat them or make any bargain. So was he happy to see his daughter back. Orts had taken the druid's warning seriously, and they stopped in Halan Hardus long enough to have very powerful amulets made. Though the making of these amulets had taken much of what they had learned from Levad, what they've earned from Levad. Despite this, Orts felt fairly satisfied. Word of this deed will get around. We may even find people seeking us out to slay monsters for them, and the like. Orts continued to drill Haram in the use of the sword and the shield, and Haram found indeed it was much different than the use of the sword alone. He continued to study and reading and writing from Sagahan and trailcraft from Asteran. From time to time, he considered his parting from Teriel. In the morning, as they were about to mount their horses to leave the neighborhood of the Druid's Grove, Haram had approached her and said, "I apologize. I was wrong to insist on camping here for the night." She turned and looked at him. "Yes, you were." For a moment he was on the verge of shouting at her, justifying his actions, but instead he closed his mouth firmly and turned on his heels and walked back to Arkwelt. He did not attempt to speak to her again. When they were dismounting in front of her father's house, however, she turned to him. "Hera?" "I?" He was prepared for whatever insult she might cast at him. "I'm sorry. I was rude to you before. You were doing what you thought was best, and I could not tell you what truly pursued us. My apologies." And before he could say anything to her, they were all walking toward the doorway of the house where Levad himself stood. He had no further chance to speak to her alone. "I'm sorry. Also allergies. It's just a day and a half for me today." "We're in fairly safe country," said Oritz, looking around. "We're unlikely to come across goblins or even bandits here. Just the same, we'll set watches." So they continued on their way, setting watches at night, but never seeing anything more dangerous than a wary wolf or two. One night, Harum unrolled his bedding under a low overhang of brush to be protected from a threatening overnight rain. Later on, when he had more time to think of it, he realized that this saved his life, putting him right out of sight in the early dawn. He was awakened by a scream. He was sitting up, reaching for his sword, before he was even aware of what was happening. His first impression was that there was 1,000 goblins in the camp, all snarling and shouting and hacking with weapons. As he sprang to his feet, he realized that they were probably no more than 30. But that was enough. More than enough. He bent down to pick up his shield, but in the same instant, a goblin came shrieking at him, sword raised. He parried the first blow and the second, then got in a stroke of his own, which took the goblin in the side of the head and dropped him to the ground. He looked around. Oryx was standing in the middle of several goblins, bleeding from a half dozen wounds while swinging his sword and shouting war cries in what must be Shandakranian. There were also flashes of lightning, which Harum took to mean that Sagahan was giving some account of himself. Astran was lying on the ground, covered in blood, but still trying to defend herself against attackers. He started to run toward her. 3 goblins suddenly interposed themselves with swords, one husky one bearing a spear. He noticed idly the spearman's ear decorations included 2 golden coins, as well as the usual feathers and bones. At the same time as he was realizing that he'd never had any lessons on fighting against more than one opponent. Fear grasped him, but he remembered what Ort's saying: master your fear, else it may kill you. His first parry was automatic, and in the midst of it, he found that he had to jump away from a thrust of the spear. Frantically, he twisted around to see what the third goblin was doing, and managed to parry a blow from one and deliver a return stroke that hit only the goblin's shield. He whirled again to parry a thrust of the spear. In mid-thrust, the goblin stepped forward with his other foot and swung the iron-shod butt of his spear up like a shaft. It hit Harum right above the eye. He staggered away, not even feeling himself hit the ground. Dun, dun, dun. So I kind of read through that really fast. I do apologize. That was faster than I would have liked. Um, hmm. I think there'll be some things I will adjust slightly. But other than that, I will talk to you all again tomorrow night. Yeah, and it'll be, like I said, it'll be between 6:30 and 8:30. Twitch, I'll update your schedule so that you're aware of it. So as a reminder, just because, yeah, I need to get things done before I come in to sit with you lovely people, and I don't want to feel rushed. And I always was, and now I'm not. Now I feel I can take as much time as I need to tell the story, even if that story is incredibly short, although it really wasn't. I was just talking really, really fast. So yeah, my apologies to people who, if it was too brief and too quick and hard to understand. I will try better. I will try to be better next time. So until then, I will talk to you then. Have a good night.